Donald Trump's political rise centered around a powerful populist narrative that resonated across diverse voter demographics, promising to disrupt the status quo in Washington, D.C., and prioritize the needs of forgotten Americans. He championed himself as a voice for those left behind by decades of globalism and endless foreign wars, especially appealing to communities with deep cultural ties to regions impacted by American foreign policy decisions. This included Arab American voters in battleground states like Michigan, who saw in Trump's platform a glimmer of hope for a less interventionist stance, especially toward the Middle East. However, since taking office, the divergence between Trump's campaign promises and his policy decisions has led to what some of his early supporters are calling instant karma. This rift, especially evident in the Arab American community, underscores the complex nature of populist politics. Promises that appear too good to be true often turn out to be just that. As we delve deeper into Trump's policy shifts, particularly in the Middle East, it becomes clear that the ideals he promoted during his campaign have, for many, devolved into disappointment and disillusionment. Part 1. A Campaign of Hope. Why Trump's message resonated with Arab American voters. During the 2016 presidential campaign, Trump crafted a message that appealed to a wide cross-section of American voters tired of both Democratic and Republican interventions abroad. His rhetoric about bringing American troops home, focusing on domestic needs, and rejecting endless wars struck a unique chord with Arab American communities in states like Michigan, where familial and cultural ties to the Middle East are strong. Many in these communities had grown weary of U.S. interventionist policies, which they saw as destabilizing and destructive to their ancestral homelands, including Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. Arab American support for Trump was not uniform, but rather based on a cautious optimism that he might act as a pragmatic, outsider president who could engage the Middle East from a more balanced perspective. The Republican platform, traditionally more pro-Israel than the Democratic platform, had some Arab American voters skeptical. However, Trump's focus on economic issues, his non-interventionist promises, and his disdain for Washington insiders were enough to convince some that he might approach the Middle East with a fresh perspective. Early campaign rhetoric, a promising change in tone. Trump's campaign message suggested that he would reject the long-standing U.S. foreign policy establishment, which many perceived as pro-Israel at the expense of Palestinian rights. His references to America First hinted that his administration might prioritize U.S. domestic concerns over foreign entanglements. Additionally, his critiques of the Iraq War and skepticism toward intervention in Syria reinforced this perception, allowing him to draw voters who hoped he would distance the U.S. from the neoconservative policies of previous administrations. For Arab American voters, particularly those in swing states, this offered a new kind of hope. Trump's campaign team even reached out to local leaders within these communities, discussing policies and addressing concerns about stability in the Middle East. With promises to negotiate better deals and even vague nods toward Palestinian self-determination, Trump managed to secure tentative support among some who had otherwise leaned Democratic. Part 2. Appointments that broke the illusion. Huckabee, Rubio, and the reality of governance. As Trump began to assemble his administration, it became clear that his foreign policy approach would not only fail to distance the U.S. from traditional interventionist stances, but might actually reinforce them. His appointment of figures like former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee and Senator Marco Rubio marked a sharp departure from his earlier rhetoric and revealed the true alignment of his administration's foreign policy. Mike Huckabee, a pro-Israel evangelical with a clear agenda. One of the earliest indications of this shift came with Trump's decision to appoint Mike Huckabee as the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Huckabee, known for his staunch support of Israel, openly dismisses the possibility of a Palestinian state and frequently emphasizes a biblically rooted claim to the land. His views often align more with religious convictions than with diplomatic norms, casting any hopes of an impartial stance on Israel-Palestine as unrealistic. For many Arab Americans who had once hoped Trump would advocate for a more balanced Middle Eastern policy, Huckabee's appointment was a shock. His insistence that Israeli settlements are part of Israel's biblical homeland signaled that the Trump administration would not only continue America's strong alliance with Israel but might intensify it, prioritizing Israel's nationalist policies over any consideration of Palestinian rights. Huckabee's hardline stance even extended to the West Bank, where he championed settlement expansion, dismissing international law in favor of a deeply religious perspective that alienated pro-Palestinian advocates. Marco Rubio, an aggressive stance on Gaza and intervention. Trump's appointment of Senator Marco Rubio as Secretary of State further crystallized his administration's shift toward a more hawkish stance in the Middle East. Rubio's record on foreign policy has been consistently aligned with an aggressive approach, particularly regarding Israel and Gaza. He has long championed a no-ceasefire approach in Gaza, dismissing civilian casualties as an unfortunate but necessary consequence of targeting Hamas. This perspective, steeped in the belief that any concession to Palestinian entities weakens Israel's security, is at odds with any hope for a U.S.-led diplomatic solution in the region. In a recent interview, Rubio reinforced his opposition to negotiations with Hamas, stating, "A ceasefire only gives Hamas time to regroup." Such a statement underscored his lack of empathy for the humanitarian crises affecting Palestinians, a position that directly contradicts Trump's early promises to focus on the humanitarian and domestic interests of Americans, including Arab Americans with deep ties to the Middle East. Rubio's views were seen by many Arab Americans as a betrayal, a stark reminder of how quickly campaign promises can be discarded in favor of political alliances. Part 3. Policy Reversals and Instant Karma for Trump's Diverse Voter Base. As these appointments solidified, Trump's policies began to veer away from his promises to voters, particularly his diverse base. Arab Americans, many of whom supported Trump due to his outsider appeal, felt an immediate sense of betrayal. The slogan of instant karma became a refrain among former supporters who realized that Trump's populist promises had quickly morphed into policies that served the interests of his political base rather than those of his broader coalition. Project 2025 and the fear of deportations. In addition to his foreign policy reversals, Trump's domestic policies also alarmed many within his diverse base. Project 2025, a proposed immigration initiative, aims to dramatically increase deportations and, in some cases, denaturalize certain immigrants. This policy has struck fear within immigrant communities, including Arab Americans, who now face the possibility of being targeted despite their U.S. citizenship. Project 2025 is a clear contradiction of Trump's original pledge to prioritize the rights and protections of all Americans, regardless of background. Arab American communities have voiced their concerns about Project 2025, arguing that it undermines the very principles of equality and opportunity that Trump once claimed to uphold. Organizations such as the Arab American Institute have called out the policy, releasing open letters urging Trump to reconsider. However, his administration has shown no signs of shifting course, leaving many to wonder if they were misled by his populist promises. Part 4. Trump's betrayal as a cautionary tale in populist politics. The widening gap between Trump's promises and his actions serves as a cautionary tale about the nature of populism and political loyalty. While populist figures often rise to power by promising radical change, the reality of governance frequently pulls them back toward more traditional policies, especially when faced with powerful political interests. Trump's appointments and policy reversals reveal that, even in populist administrations, the influence of lobbyists, evangelicals, and political elites remains strong. For Arab Americans, Latino communities, and other groups that place their hopes in Trump's campaign, his administration's actions are a reminder that even the most compelling promises can be hollow. Trump's foreign policy, which many hoped would be pragmatic and peace-focused, has instead aligned with the same interventionist stance that he once criticized. His willingness to prioritize powerful allies over the needs of his diverse voter base suggests that populist loyalty may often serve the leader more than the people. Lessons for future voters. The instant karma phenomenon experienced by Trump's disillusioned supporters serves as a lesson for future voters. It highlights the importance of holding leaders accountable, even those who promise to drain the swamp. Trump's pivot away from populism toward a more hawkish, pro-establishment approach exposes the gap between rhetoric and reality in political movements. For voters, especially those from marginalized communities, the lesson is clear. Political promises are rarely immune to the pressures of governance. Trump's relationship with his Arab American supporters, once grounded in hope for a balanced and pragmatic foreign policy, has become a tale of betrayal and disillusionment. His appointments of hardliners like Huckabee and Rubio, coupled with policies that threaten the very communities that supported him, reflect a significant divergence from his initial campaign vision. The disillusionment felt by these communities serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of populist promises and the risks inherent in political loyalty. For Arab Americans and other groups once captivated by Trump's rhetoric, the instant karma they now face underscores the danger of populist figures who promise everything yet deliver only what aligns with their own political survival. As Trump's administration continues to shape American foreign policy, the gap between his campaign promises and his governing reality remains a sobering reminder of the true nature of populist politics.